Everybody, today we learned about rounding to the nearest 10 and 100 using place value, and we also talked about rounding to make ballpark estimates. Let's start with rounding to the nearest 10. When you have a two-digit number, like the number 58, when you are rounding to the nearest 10, you're going to underline the tens place. The 5 is in the tens place. Check the neighbor to the right. If that number is 5 or higher, this number moves up 1. If this number to the right is 4 or less, this number stays the same. So let's check the neighbor. 8 is higher than 5. So this 5 moves up to a 6, and this number turns to a 0. That means 58 rounded to the nearest 10 is 60. Let's try another one. For example, the number 32. Rounded to the nearest 10. We underline the tens place, check the neighbor. The neighbor is less than 5. Therefore, the 3 stays the same and the 2 moves to a 0. 32 rounded to the nearest 10 is 30. You can also round three-digit numbers to the nearest 10. Let's do a couple of those. So for example, in the number 123, rounded to the nearest 10, we underline the tens place. The 2 is in the tens place. We check the neighbor. 3 is less than 5. So the 1 and the 2 stay the same, and the 3 turns to a 0. 123 rounded to the nearest 10 is 120. Another thing we talked about when you're rounding to the nearest 10 is you look at the 10 that is below and above where your number falls in the middle. So you might ask yourself, is 123 closer to 120 or 130? Well, it's closer to 120. Or is 58 closer to 50 or 60? It's closer to 60. Or is 32 closer to 30 or 40? It's closer to 30. Okay? Let's try another three-digit number rounded to the nearest 10. Let's do 157. Rounded to the nearest 10, we're going to underline the 5, check the neighbor. This time the neighbor is more than 5. So the 1 stays the same, the 5 boosts up to a 6, and the 7 turns to a 0. 157 rounded to the nearest 10 is 160. Also, 157, is it closer to 150 or 160? It's closer to 160. That's how you round to the nearest 10. Let's talk about how to round to the nearest 100. Rounding to the nearest 100, you'll use three-digit numbers to start. Let's start with 324. If we're rounding to the nearest 100, we're going to underline the hundreds place. We're going to check the neighbor. If the neighbor is 5 or more, this number boosts up to the next one. If it's 4 or less, this number stays the same. Well, 2 is less than 5, so our 3 is going to stay the same, and the other numbers turn to zeros. The other way you can think about this is 324. Is it closer to 300 or 400? It's closer to 300. All right, let's try another one. 489. Rounded to the nearest 100. Underline the hundreds place, check the neighbor. 8 is greater than 5, so our 4 boosts up to a 5, and the other numbers turn to 0. So 489 rounded to the nearest 100 is 500. 489 is closer to 500 than 400. So you need to be able to round to the nearest 10 and the nearest 100 in order to do ballpark estimates. Ballpark estimates help us to find out if our answer that when we actually do solve our addition and subtraction problems is in the ballpark. If you round to the nearest 10, the ballpark is going to be within 10. If you round to the nearest 100, your answer is going to be within 100 of your estimate. Okay, so let's do a couple of those as practice. So just as an example, in the problem 43 plus 26. We're going to do an estimate first to help us to know where the ballpark is for our actual answer. We're going to round 43 to the nearest 10 since it's a two-digit number. Is 43 closer to 40 or 50? Well, we can underline and check the neighbor. We see it is 40. We're going to round 26. Is it closer to 20 or 30? Check the neighbor. That's going to boost this up to 30. Our ballpark estimate is going to be 40 plus 30 equals 70. We know that our actual answer is going to be in the ballpark of 70. Since we rounded to the nearest 10, the actual answer should be within 10 of 70. Well, when we actually solve our problem, 43 plus 26 equals 69, well, we can see it's definitely within 10. Our estimate helps us to check our answer. Yes, this answer makes sense. Now, for your homework tonight, you don't have to solve for the actual problem. What I want you to do is just practice doing this rounding and getting the ballpark estimate. Let's practice a 3-digit one. Let's do 172 plus 109. Now, you have two options for this problem. You can choose to round to the nearest 10, or you can choose to round to the nearest 100. Just keep in mind that when you round to the nearest 10, you're going to get a more exact estimate. If you round to the nearest 100, then your ballpark estimate is going to be in the ballpark of, around 100, within 100 instead of within 10. So let's round to the nearest 100 first. 172, is that closer to 100 or 200? Well, we check the neighbor. This boosts this up to a 2. 172 is closer to 200. 109, check the neighbor. 109 is closer to 100 than 200. So our ballpark estimate would be 300. Now you can also do this problem rounded to the nearest 10 instead of 100. So let's try that. If we'd rounded to the nearest 10, we're going to check the neighbor. 172 would round to 170, and 109 would round to 110. Well, 70 plus 10 equals 80, and 1 plus 1 equals 2. So if you round to the nearest 10, your ballpark estimate's going to look like this. 170 plus 110 equals 280. If you chose to round to the nearest 100, which is okay, you would round 172 to 200, 109 to 100, and your ballpark estimate would be 300. Okay? Let's do one more that has a 3-digit number and a 2-digit number. Let's do 87 plus 113. So what you can do is round 87. Is it closer to 80 or 90? 90. And with 113, you could round to the nearest 100 and make it 100, or you could round it to the nearest 10 and make it 110. It's completely up to you. In this case, since I rounded 87 to the nearest 10, I'll round 113 to the nearest 10. That would be 110. 90 plus 10 is 100, plus another 100 is 200. Okay? So, good luck with your homework tonight. You have a little rounding and a little ballpark estimates with addition. Tomorrow we learn a new way to solve addition problems.